Hello. Today we're going to do pivot tables. So I'm going to do a lot of pivot tables. So we're going to get this right, and the examiner seems to like it, and you'll see it in a lot of examples. So what is a pivot table? Well, in a pivot table, it's going to try and create a little table of data. So you're going to have some various sort of things, and we're going to have some options. Let's say in this instance, products there, and then we're going to have some values in there. We're going to produce a little table of quantities and values in there. Now, so we're going to produce some tables of data of how things sort of add up here, and there's two ways. Well, you're thinking, well, how can I do this? So let's say what we want to have is the total quantity of all these product ones and the total value of all these product ones and the twos and the threes and what have you. How can we do it? Well, let's say option one, which we did last week, was we could produce some subtotals in. So let's stop produce here and go to the end like that there, and let's put a subtotal in. So we're going to go insert into here. Sorry, no, we're not. We're going to go into data. Sorry, into data into here. Subtotal on the right hand side over here. So here's where subtotals is. Hit that. Now, and so each change in these products in here, we're going to put a subtotal in for quantity and value. And we're going to press OK. And you see now we've got these subtotals in here. Let's make it a bit simpler and let's just hide it. So we'll get rid of the second one here. And we can now go, right, OK then, well, we'll have here our product. So we'll have product one. Actually, we can't. Let's go back into all the detail. Sorry, put that back up there. Product one. You already see how difficult this is becoming. Quantity. And we're going to have value as well here. Okay, fastest way to do this, probably hide, get to that one there, and we're going to go, oh no we can't, actually that's not the fastest way of doing it. Okay, so we've got to go down to here, we've got to put the quantity in there, and we've got to put the value in, and we're going to go, another value there, and a quantity there, and we're going to put the quantity of number 3 in, and for number 4 in, and number 5 in, and number 6 in. That there though. Oh, let's drag that 2 to the right. We've got a gap in the middle, so we'll delete that out. Pull that back in. Okay, there's our table. A little bit of formatting to get it to the move to the right, like that. Which I just went up here. There's our formatting. That tabs it, that aligns things on the right hand side. And so we produced our table. And to be fair, was reasonably quick, but wasn't as quick as it could be. Took up a bit of time in that one there, and if we were doing it, and you weren't as adept in Excel, then it could have took a lot longer. Is there a way of producing this this particular sort of table faster, really, within Excel? And so, what is the examiner after? Well, there is. So let's get rid of. Let's just undo, shall we? So there is. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a pivot table to produce that type of table first. And then at the end of it, then I'll show you actually how to use sumif to produce the same table and why sumif is going to be superior in real life. Okay, so what is a pivot table and where is it going to go? So it's going to produce that kind of table that we just saw there. It's in insert and it's in pivot table. Now here we're in game mode in the video. So if I press the pivot table thing, it will actually switch it off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the print screens. So I'm going to press that pivot table here, press it, and then up will come this little chart, and if I press that, that will switch the video off, and you're going to have this thing here, which is going to create our pivot table. What we're going to do is we're going to, in this data range here, you're going to press on that there, which is the thing that we use to create our ranges in our tables, either in charts or in tables here. We'll press that. So you're going to press that, and it will produce you a little dash box wherever your cell is, so it'll probably be here, dashing around. You take that and you drag it all the way to the bottom of your data. And it is there, and press enter. Okay, and that will then clear that, and then you go and press OK. So then it would have a range of data in here, which is going to be your table, your data that's going to go in your pivot table. It's going to appear here. You'll press OK there though, and we will then get to this stage here, where we have got a little pivot table. I'm going to take all this data out though first. It'll look like that. So that's what it will look like. You'll have this thing appearing here, where it basically is loaded in this data on the left hand side that we've got, and it's starting to give you some options. Yeah, so you can start to do this, and what you do is you take these things and you drag them. So let's say that I want the products in the row, which is what I had in the previous one. So that will put little rows there. So you see where I was producing in the last table the products 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, more like the values that I wanted. So values would appear in these columns in here. So I'm going to go, I quite like the quantity in the values. I want the values, and I just drag them. You see, all that I'm doing is just dragging them down and putting them in there. And then it's produced for me that table. I'm going to take those out. Let's take those out there. Let's say instead I went products into these columns here, and I'm going to go quantities into these values here, and I could do it like that. No. Okay, let's do something slightly different. Let's take those out again, and let's put into, so let's put the products in the rows, and I'll put the months in the columns, and then let's have some quantities. How many did we sell in each month? Okay, well, there's what we sold in each month. So when January, February, those were our products, and these were the amounts that we sold of each quantity in each month. Let's see what the value of all of that was. Let's just change that and put that into the, let's take that quantity up there, put the months in the columns. There's how much we sold each month in terms of in value and price. So it's quite a powerful tool. You can sort of produce these pivot tables, which is why a lot of people like them. They're really heavily used by accountants for this kind of analysis. You can see it's very quick and easy to use. You can then produce some filters on it as well, and you can also, in this instance, let's say I'm going to format this because I don't like the way in which it's going to look, or the way in which it looks at the moment. So I'm going to just make that a bit neater. So I come into here like that. There we go. So we can do all the normal things like formatting and what have you. Click back in the cell, and up comes these pivot table fields as well, so we can then produce it again. So that's pivot table number 1. Okay, so hopefully let's just go back and see what we did there. So I'll go back and just take these things out. So let's have a run through again. So here was our data here. I've gone and hit insert pivot table. So I hit that bit there, go into the insert tab, hit the pivot table, up comes here. I can't do it for you because it'll switch the video off. Then here's where our data range comes in. So I press here. This will turn into a little hashed line going around there. Highlight all of the data that you want, including the top line, which will be your titles. Press OK. That will then appear in this line in here. In this part here will be your data range. You press OK, and then you'll get this, which will have your pivot table up then to load. You press into the pivot table, any cell into it, it'll come up. So if I'm outside, there's nothing there, press into it, up it comes. And then I decide what I want in my rows and my columns, and the values within those rows and columns. So the rows will be down here, the columns will be across here, the values will be the figures that appear within it. So let's say I'm going to have how many products I sell. So products I'm going to take and I drag it down into the rows, which I'm going to sell each month, which I'll have in the columns, and I want to know the actual amounts, the quantities that I'm selling rather than the values of them. Okay, and that was the amount that I sold each time. I can go into it and I can format it, so I can make it a bit neater, however I want it to do it. I can filter as well. Can use the filters if you wanted to. So you can these little filters that will appear here. I can put a filter in to actually sort of know how to put a filter in. There, I'll show you how to do it. Well, we'll do it in a later version. Data, so it'll be in home. Actually, I think it's just switched it. It's in there in our little sorts and filters. Actually, it won't have. Let's go here. Right. Oh, I'll highlight the column, do a sort and filter there. Oddly enough, it won't let you put a filter within it, but you can put a filter above it. and if you put a filter above it, then you can do the normal filter that you would have. What the filters do, and probably a better example later on in the video, so I'll save that for later. So that's the first pivot table that we're going to put in this video. We're going to do a second one now. So we're going to go over to staff sickness, and I've got here a set of staff members. I've got 150 staff members in here. I've randomised up this data, and they've been people who've been off sick between 2014 and 2018. So over that sort of five-year period. I put some data in it, number of days that they've been off sick, and let's try and see out. What we're going to see is we're going to add up, see who's got the most sickness effectively. So we're going to go into our pivot table. So I'm going to want in my rows, I want person. Yeah, so I'm going to take the person, put that into there. Then I want to know what their day's sickness is going to be, so I'm going to put that in my column. No, actually, no, that would be a mistake. See how I've done there the whole series of days sickness? That wasn't very useful at all. I might have the year actually in my column. There we go. That'll be useful. You know, when were they off sick? And then my days sickness that they all had in the values. Yeah, so you can see this person one here has had 51 days off in these 5 years here. This is when they had them. And let's say you are the HR director of this company, and you've got a sickness problem. You feel that the sickness is too high within the organisation. Well, who's creating all this sickness? You know, we've got see how suddenly sickness has gone way up this year. Right. Well, let's see who's causing this sickness and what's going to happen with it. So, right. Well, let's put a filter in here. So let's put a little filter in column K. So let's go into our home here. Put a little filter in. So filter's over here. And if we click on this little thing here, and you got this option, this filter option. Oh, let's try. It says it doesn't like that. Let's highlight the whole thing then and put the filter in there. Okay. So we're trying to make, and this is where later on we'll explain how pivot tables aren't as great as something called sumifs. And here it can be a little bit clunky, and I didn't quite like that. So I was sort of making Excel bend a little bit. Really, I highlighted the whole cell or the whole row. I put in my little my mouse on there, clicking when it was shaded, and then going into this one here, putting the filter in there. So what we're going to do, let's deselect all. Let's slide down to the bottom, and let's put in, these will be totals here. So let's put in the top 10 people. So let's just tick these on here, and so you get this will be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So these are the people that are causing sickness then in our organisation this year. This person 5 here has been off a lot, and they've been off a lot in the past as well. This person here as well. So you can start to sort of see by using this sort of pivot table here, we get a bit of an idea about, well, actually, you know, which ones are we having sort of issues with. You know, so you can sort of highlight it and let's put the blanks in. So we've got their titles in there. So let's go back and highlight the blanks. So, and also let's put in something else which will give us that 2018. Okay. So we've now got these sort of options that we can sort of filter on there as well, and we've got this pivot table, so it's just faster to do it. Let's do another one. Yeah. So we're into the stock in here. So in here, this is there's 6 different sites, I think. Or is there 5 different sites on this one? Yeah, 5 different sites. And in these sites, we've got these various sort of engines and tires and wheels and windows and seats and pedals and all these kind of things. We're trying to work out what stock do these individual sites hold. Let's say they're all the same type of site. They all make the same amount of sales each month, so they should all pretty much hold the same amount of stock. And if one of the managers is holding too much, then you know, they're doing it for their own convenience rather than say our just-in-time system that we would quite like. So we'd like to see quickly who's holding all of this stock. So what I've done is I put in here various sort of different types of things that go in a car, the amounts that the sites are holding, and the sites that they're at. And you see how I'm really heavily randomized this data up now. So this is just all over the place really in here. So without even having to sort, this pivot table will produce it. So I'm going to click in the pivot table. Let's say I'm going to have the site in the rows here. So there we go, there's our sites. And I'm going to have the part type, let's say, in the columns. Okay, so there's our part type in here. And then I'm going to put, let's say, the value how much are they holding in total stock? How much is this costing us to hold? I'm going to put the value in the values. And so what we can see here is what's going on here then. So in our grand totals, we can see that site number 2 and site number 4 are holding huge amounts of stock. They're holding twice as much as site number 3 and site number 5. So we're having to pay twice as much to keep this stock, the amount that we're having to service it in terms of our interest costs and what have you in there. So that's something that we're not quite liking it. So let's go back and see what it is that they're holding. Well, they seem to be holding huge numbers of engines. Let's change then the values from let's switch that off and let's put in the quantities in that values. So you see they're holding 269 engines and 273 engines. Well, they don't need to hold that many engines. That's ridiculous. You know, we can see that we don't need to hold remotely that amount. So that's what we really need to run down that stock. And we need to either distribute the engines elsewhere and just run down our whole stocks then, or see how many we use in a week. So this is pivot tables then. And yeah, quite quick really, quite fast. We're going to do it again though. I'm going to see what the weakness of pivot tables are now. So I sort of didn't go down and just type all this stuff in. I created it in terms of very randomized. You can see I've sort of used up some equations, and I'll just press F9. You can see how it changes. So that's how I created the data. Let's now create a pivot table in here, and we'll do the same pivot table as we had. So we're going to have the site in the rows, and we're going to have the part type in the columns, and we'll have our values in the values. So here we go. We've created our pivot table there. We've loaded our data in. Now let me change the data. So let's assume then it's now next month in here. We've loaded up this data from our stock sheet, our stock record sheets. We almost have some kind of stock system or something that's collecting it. It's now changed. So let's say it's changed to this. Do you see how the pivot table doesn't change? Which is a bit. So we'd have to go back in. We'd have to create. Effectively, we have to redo the work from scratch every month. We'd have to create the pivot table, load in the sites, do the thing there. So it's actually more time. So let's do this. Let's see. Is there a different way of doing this? So what I'm going to do is I'll put in the sites. Yeah, I'm just going to site 1. Okay, and I'll put a total in there. And then I'm going to put these titles in here. Like that. Okay, and I'll have a total in there. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create something called a sumif equation. So I'm going to go equals sumif. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to do this in a combination. And so what you have to do is you have to create a combination of things. So here I'm going to use something called concatenate. Okay, so I've concatenated. I'm going to stick these two things together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the pivot table. I'm going to show you how it's created. Actually, I'm going to do it in this. I'll put it next to here, like that. I'll put it next to it, highlight that up, and I'm going to create the pivot table from scratch. Slide down to where the bottom bit is. Oh, actually, faster way to do it. Slide down to the end, and so into the next to it, I put now this combination of this tire and site, which is what the pivot table uses. Okay, and then I'm going to use a sumif. Now what I'll do is I'll do the same concatenation over here to create a little box. I wouldn't do this in reality, but I'll just make it look a little bit simpler. So concatenate, and I went with that first, and I go that there. So I'm going to create this little box. I'm going to use absolute referencing here. So you see I'm going to use absolute referencing. So that's gone. The actual absolute referencing should have been that one. And in front of there. Okay. There. So now you see I've created the breaks for site 1, site 2, site 3, 4, 5. And I'll create a little box of data like that. There. So there's the tyres and the windows. Keep going. Okay. So you'll see what I've done is I've created here the same data here in this little box as I've created here. So there's a mirrors in site 4, and there's a mirror wherever the mirror is, and site 4 there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use something called sumif. So I'm going to go equals sumif there in that row. Whenever you find something in that row that equals that, add up. Now in this case, then let's say I'm going to create this as quantities. I want to see how many there are. That there. Okay. So there's 215 breaks. But you can see as it keeps changing with the randomization here. Oh, right, now I need to put some absolute referencing in here as well. There we go. And let's just sum that. And sum that as well. Now, you can see that this is exactly the same pivot table here. It took a little bit longer to create, but as you can see now, when I'm creating the randomization, every month this now changes. So I produce this once, I format it however I want once, and then I put this in, and I download it next month and next month into this little sort of section here, and as it changes, all of the data changes, and that's why sumifs is better than pivot tables by a considerable margin. However, you have to be able to write to create it. Professional accountants should be able to do this because it will save that accountant and all of their team when they create all the analysis huge amounts of time over the fullness of time. If you imagine that this was something that we do every month for 10 years or what have you, huge amounts of days sort of saved by producing that. Also as well, we can see the equation here. In pivot table, you can't see anything. It's just a number. That's it. You can't make a change to it. That's one thing. Let's say now, although let's say it wasn't this data, we're going to produce, or we're going to insert another line in here. Actually, so we'll insert another line. What I'm going to do actually is I'm going to just freeze this whole thing. So I'll take the equations out. I'm going to paste special, paste values. So I've taken the equations out. They're gone. And I'm going to put in another set of wheels in site 4. And let's just see. You can see if you follow and look at that site 4 set of wheels there, it actually changed. So I could also, this could also be something that I'm either changing the data and I'm just putting an extra row in, or an extra couple of rows in, or alternatively, I'm actually changing the equation slightly. Something was wrong over here, just slightly tweaked it and made a little bit of a change to it. So let's say that suddenly this price wasn't, didn't make that, it made it 1500 instead, and it will change. Well, it would change if this was set to the values. Instead of being on BB, if it was on DD, this would change. It will not change in the pivot table. So the problem with the pivot table is that you can sort of produce your data. You have to do your pivot table right at the end. It might not have quite worked for you. It might have taken a little bit while. Then you're going back and you have to redo it. So you'd have to keep redoing the pivot tables. So it has this big negative thing. Some ifs more complicated, but will allow you to then update it. So that's the end of today's lesson. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't worry about the sumifs really. You'll pretend in the exam really need to be doing the pivot tables. That's what will be required. However, in real life, certainly once you start to go to the professional side, you'll start to use sumifs a lot more. And I'll see you in the lesson. Thanks. Bye bye.